Hello, I'm Mike Richmond. I'm an adjunct professor at NYU. I'm a bassist and cellist, and I've performed and recorded with Miles Davis, Stan Getz, Elvin Jones, Joe Henderson, Dizzy Gillespie, Horace Silver, Gil Evans, amongst others. I also teach at Rutgers University. I'm a professor down there, and I teach for the German government too, and I've been doing that for well over 20 years. And I've been teaching actually since college and playing since high school. In college, I studied classical bass performance and education. So the day after I graduated from college, I began teaching public school as a substitute, went into public school education, and taught for about a year. Some people were hearing me play. I always worked as a bass player. And before I got into the jazz world, I was in the commercial world. And somebody heard me play on a gig and called me to play with the pop singer Tom Jones. And went on the road with him for a little while and got involved in that part of the business, stopped teaching for 2 or 3 years. And there was another singer named Engelbert Humperdinck and a group called Tony Orlando and Dawn. And did that for off and on for about 3 or 4 years. And came back to New York and got a call to do a jam session one night. Went to the jam session, and the next day, Chico Hamilton called, the drummer. And I had had his records when I was a kid growing up, and I went to a rehearsal at his house. He had a gig in town, and there was a very good saxophone player named Arnie Lawrence, who was in the band, and at that time he was in the Tonight Show band. And we got along very well musically, and Arnie turned me on to a lot of gigs around town with the Tonight Show people. This is in the early 70s. And my career took off from there. People heard me with Chico. Gil Evans would come into the gig and ask me to play with him. Joe Farrell, a great saxophone player who has since passed, used to come into the gig, and I joined Joe's band after he left Chick Corea's Light as a Feather band and started traveling around with them. Stan Getz heard about me, gave me a call, joined his band. There was a great flute player named Hubert Laws. He's kind of out of the scene now, but probably the best jazz flute player ever. And Hubert gave me a call, joined his band. Jack DeJohnette heard me. And I was kind of rotating all these gigs at the same time, and also teaching in different colleges as an adjunct, because even now it happens, if they see you on TV or hear a recording on the radio, they assume you can teach, which they shouldn't assume, so they call you to teach at colleges. And I would take different students at schools around New York and started teaching again. This was around 1975 at the college level, and continued going on the road about half the year. Spent half the year overseas, half the year here. Then overseas took over a little bit. I guess around 1976 or 77, was spending about 8 or 9 months a year traveling around the world with Jack and Stan's band, and I would switch off gigs and get a sub for either band whenever I could, and came home and taught. I have to say I never missed my lessons. I always gave the required amount of lessons for the year, and I've been doing it ever since, and it's 2005 now. I grew up with a lot of classical music and Russian classical music, which is very romantic music from the early 1800s, middle 1800s, and it's very soulful. So I play like that with my tone, with a very long sustained note, whether it's an eighth note when you're soloing or a very long quarter note. It's a very European quarter note and idea of playing. And I'm going back to what my grandparents used to play and my parents used to play in the house while I'm swinging. I'm always trying to swing. And as opposed to a shorter, stickier quarter note, which the guys in the 50s played, Mingus, Pettiford, I like that long, sustained Beethoven type vibe. And that's how I feel normally. I gave it up for a while and I'll still give it up too. Somebody calls me for a gig and it's an older style gig, I'll do whatever the gig's called for. You know, you do what the job is. But my natural thing is a very long, sustained vibe, very melodic vibe. Growing up in high school, We had a dance band, as they used to call it. Had a great teacher, Leroy Evans, and we used to do these charts, these Charlie Barnett charts, Woody Herman charts, Duke Ellington charts, Count Basie charts, and once in a while they would ask me to improvise, and I had no idea how to improvise. So whenever we did a tune that I'd have to take a solo on, I'd find the original record and transcribe a solo on the original record, which was usually not a bass solo, and I would play that solo. It was usually a trumpet or a saxophone solo, because it was much better than anything I could think of playing, and learn how to improvise like that. Then I joined another band in high school, and we were doing a lot of Oscar Peterson repertoire. And I also couldn't improvise or really walk a bass line on my own unless it was written, because I didn't study that. I was always classically trained. And the piano player said, take this record home and play what this guy plays, who was Ray Brown. So whatever tunes we played and rehearsed, I would learn Ray's bass lines and play along with the record. One was the Night Train record, another one was the Trio plus Clark Terry, and I would learn all of the bass lines and just get ready for the rehearsal, which was every Tuesday afternoon after school, after high school. And really got into a nice groove because they try to play exactly like Ray. And I try to get his solos as much as I can handle technically. And didn't realize I was actually learning how to put together a good bass line. I was just trying to not mess up the tune. So, okay, I go through high school, I go through college like that, transcribe hundreds, if not thousands of bass lines from he and PC, Mingus and the great bass players, Pettiford, and try to get their solos. Not really improvising totally on my own, but I developed a system where, this is the long answer to a short question, where let's say I got 20 courses of a Ray Brown bass line in C. And this is how I teach at school too. Before they developed the term cut and paste, I would cut and paste his bass lines. So I would put the 5th chorus with the 1st chorus, and the 2nd chorus with the 13th chorus, and I'd change his bass line around to make it more of the way I would want it to be, because I was tired of playing the same thing over and over again, as good as it was. Then I would take the second 4 bars and replace it with the second 4 bars of another chorus. And I would cut and paste the whole thing and learn how to walk like that and solo like that with different solos. And I teach like this also. And okay, years later, fast forward, I get to New York and I'm playing just like Ray Brown. No, that's not true. I wouldn't say just like Ray Brown. I was just a carbon copy of Ray Brown. And kind of solo like him. I wasn't even using 2 fingers like was the modern style. I was a 1-finger guy like a lot of the kids are now. And I think having played along with all those records, and for sure Ron Carter too, I had every bass line from all the Miles Davis records. As a matter of fact, when I got called to play with Miles, I thought it's no small coincidence because I've been playing with him for 20 years before I got the gig, 25 years before, 30 years before I got the gig. I've been playing along with his records. Same thing with Stan. First rehearsal at Stan's house, his wife said, Mike, it sounds like you've been playing with Stan in the band for a long time. I said, I've been playing with Stan since I was 14, but this is the first time I've done it in person. And whenever somebody would call actually for a gig, I'd buy all the records, learn all the tunes, and learn the bass lines that the previous bass players played. And at the rehearsal, the first time we got together, I would pretty much mimic what went down on the records. Then I'd filter my own thing into it. And I think being that studious really helped me get in the scene. A strong groove helped. And I could solo too, but like other people, eventually I developed myself. Short story, I remember I was working with Joe Farrell. Randy Imbrecker had a club called 7th Avenue South years ago. Randy might have been in the band. I know he was there. Just a great band, and it was Joe Farrell's band. And I remember getting off the stand, and I was standing at the bar, and there were a bunch of guys talking on the right, and I was standing on the other side. Their back was turned to me, and they said, "Why is Mike doing all these gigs? All he does is play like Ray Brown all the time." You know, and I'm thinking, well, if you played like Ray Brown too, you'd be doing some gigs yourself, you know. So I think that helped, just having a solid groove and being very studious. I'm still like that, I haven't changed. And that really helped, as opposed to in the early 70s, people were into a groove, but it was coming out of a free thing because Train's ladder thing was free, so people were getting pretty free. I like that also, but I was really into a solid groove, and I think people heard that groove. And then harmonic knowledge and melodic technique came a little bit later. You know, that became a little more sophisticated. But I think people heard strong time and strong groove and went with that and just waited for me to catch up with them harmonically. The highest level is the highest level. For instance, 2 years ago, I was opening up for Sting with an Arabic group. I play in this Palestinian band, and I always joke that I'm the only American and definitely the only Jew in the band. And we have a very nice groove and a very good vibe, and Sting wanted us to open up for him for this series of concerts. And our band was really nice for what we were doing, very authentic music. And Sting is Sting. Beautiful tunes, beautiful lyrics, great grooves, great presentation. Could be that, it could be the Beatles, some of the best tunes ever written. Beethoven's Fifth, how can you beat that? A Love Supreme. Yesterday's from the Beatles. I mean, the level, as long as you get to a good spiritual level, and you're playing with guys on that plane, men and women on that plane, it's all the same. You're just hooked into each other. That's the best thing about playing music, is you get a chance to play with people at that level, and it transforms you to another part of the universe. 2 nights ago, I had a concert for the Dalai Lama. He was in New Jersey, and it was a peace concert. And we just did tunes that concentrated on a peaceful vibe and peace in the world. And we did one of my compositions called A Prayer for Peace. And when you play that, and there's a Dalai Lama around, it just puts you someplace else. And I have to say, it's not that much different than being on stage with Miles or Stan or any of those geniuses. So when you're walking on the street, you're almost not on the pavement. You're almost walking on air because you have that vibe about you, having had those experiences. And when I was very young, I performed as a vocalist actually with the Philadelphia Orchestra when I was very young, and in a choir. And I grew up in Philadelphia. My teacher was in the Philadelphia Orchestra, my bass teacher, Edward Arian. And I remember the sound. I always heard it from the audience as a kid. Being on stage with the Philly Orchestra was another vibe. There's no way to describe it. Not unlike being with Miles or the other guys. And your whole feeling of life maybe is a little bit heavier, which helps as a teacher because your whole groove is wider when you come to school. So you can give that to the kids, as opposed to talking about playing the bass and talking about playing music and never having really done it. So, and they know what you do, you know, they've known you play with certain people, so they listen. And last night I had this performance with Eddie Gomez at a master class at NYU, and played a tune with him up front. And we're all coming from Eddie the last 35 years, technically, melodically. He was the cat who really set the pace since Bill Evans in the late 60s. After Scott LaFaro, he took technical and melodic bass playing to the stratosphere. And that put me up a couple of notches last night. I played with Eddie a couple times before. Jack DeJohnette's band used to play opposite Bill Evans, and at the end of the gig, at the end of the concert, we would combine bands and play some tunes together. And once, years ago, I was leading the Mingus Dynasty band right after Charles died, the very first Dynasty band, the small group, and I talked Sue, Charles's wife, into, instead of hiring an alto player, let's hire another good bass player to play the alto book, and I'll split the alto book, playing with the bow an octave higher, and we'll split the bass book. So I hired Eddie for a gig, and I thought, well, he's my favorite bass player. I want to play with him, so I'll hire him for my gig, which was really the Mingus gig. And so we had played together then too. But last night, you know, made it a little bit higher too. All the above. I'm hired as a jazz teacher, but you can't play the bass unless you study classically. So we study with the bow half the lesson, and we do classical excerpts. For sure, there's a Simandl book. There's a very good method from Europe, Simandl. Very old method, 100-year-old method, 150-year-old method. Great fingering system that we're all coming from. All the bass players have studied from there. I teach that. I also started a bass ensemble at NYU about 10 years ago, and it's a big band of only bass players. And I write all the arrangements, and all the background parts are played with the bow for the most part. And they're just trumpet, trombone, and saxophone parts. So that's another exercise in itself. And only one guy in this bass ensemble plays the bass part. 3 or 4 play the melody. I have around 8 or 9 people playing background parts and 1 bass player. So that's a classical type vibe where you're playing accompanying parts with the bow so you can get more sustain. And the people are playing the melody, just like whoever's playing the melody in a big band, and one guy's clunking away on the bass part. Highly recommend going into the field. Doesn't matter what type of music you play, as long as you're studious, you're always an hour early for the gig, always an hour early for the gig, presentable on stage. If the band leader says we're playing certain tunes, it could be Rolling Stone tunes, it could be Coltrane tunes, doesn't matter. Learn all the tunes from the record perfectly. If you're a bass player, learn all the bass lines. Do your homework. If I hired a plumber to fix my pipes in the house, I want them to come to the house with all the correct tools and know exactly what fits and what doesn't fit. It's the same thing. Somebody hires me for a groove. For a certain type of groove in a band, I'll just study that groove. There's a producer in New York that hires me to do reggae dates on electric bass. And I wouldn't say I'm the hottest reggae guy in the world, but it sounds okay. Whenever I get a call, I'll go out and buy 10 CDs, transcribe my favorite phrases, and I'll come into the studio with maybe 30 or 40 really nice little 4-bar phrases, 2 or 4-bar phrases, and I'll come in and sound like a pro. And I just do my homework. And that's what anybody at any age should do if you want to make a living as a musician. You just do your homework. You're prepared for the gig, but once it comes time to play, when I know the music, I play with my eyes closed because I only tune in the people I'm working with on stage. And if the drummer, let's say it comes time for a bass solo and the drummer switches cymbals, it's a darker cymbal, I might play a little higher so I can get through the tone of the band. Or if there's a guitar player and he has a low tone, I might play more mid-range and higher. You don't know what's going to happen until you play because somebody might feed you something you didn't expect. So it's all from inspiration. I was telling a student yesterday that I was in a gig overseas and somebody called a tune that I really didn't know. I heard it on a record a long time ago. And it was a concert, and they're always, every night you're on TV, you're recorded, somebody's recording you. So you really have to keep your ears open. And you wait for you know the key, and you just keep your ears open. And this person put me on the spot and gave me this first solo of the tune. So you can't play anything until you hear the chord. You work your way through the head. You really hear where the piano player's leading you. You hear where the melody's going, and you have a general idea of where the chords are going with the tune. And then they play a chord, you respond. They play a chord, you respond. And you can't preconceive anything. No amount of homework will get you ready for that. Years ago, I worked with Milt Jackson for 2 weeks, and every tune, for 3 sets a night for 2 weeks, he wouldn't tell me the tune. He wanted to see if I could hear and play. And I was just starting out. I was around 23, 24 years old, and he would say, 1, 2, you'll know what to do. I had no idea what to do. So the first note of the tune, I'd go, there'd be a thump. By the second beat, I'd hear what key we were in. I'd learn the form of the tune through the playing, so you count the amount of bars on the head, on the in melody, to figure out how many sections you are to the tune. If it's A, B, A, you know there's a certain amount of tunes in the A section. You go to the bridge, you count the amount of bars in the bridge, and you know what key the bridge starts in. If there's a C section at the end or another A section, so by the time the in head is finished, you know the form of the tune and the basic key centers. You fill it in like a puzzle along the way. By the time you get to the bass solo, you felt like you wrote the tune. So that's just complete inspiration in ears. You don't have any preconceived idea with that because people like that won't tell you, you know, as great as they are, they want to see if you're really on the ball. So that's inspiration, but you have to have ears like that too.